I'm Eurydice, and I want to discuss with you my concept for a universal mother income. I came up with the idea for a mother income a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, but it has taken me 2 decades of an enormous amount of time, research, thinking, work, writing, rewriting, testing, to actually formulate it in a concrete way that can be explained simply and easily, and I believe can actually be put to practice in the real world. I'm a writer and also an artist. I am Greek. I'm from the island of Lesbos. I came to America when I was 15 years old on my own. I had 5 university degrees, ended up at Brown University teaching, and I realized that even though my degrees were all in creative writing, comparative literature, I realized that I felt very gate-kept by academia, and I wanted to stay in the real world. My first book was about the female body, identified as a feminist, and I wanted to understand the difference between men and women in the 20th century. That book got me a job writing as a journalist, pretty much anything I wanted to do. So I was working at Spin magazine. At the time that I got this idea, I had just published a book with Scribner called Satyricon USA, which was the result of spending 3 years traveling the country, talking to people about the politics of their sexual bodies, about their sexual changes, inclinations, and basically what was happening in America, the sexual state of the union at the end of the millennium. And what I was discovering was not what I expected. As a radical feminist, I thought that we had been liberated, and in fact I discovered that we had found new ways to oppress our bodies. It was during the book tour that I became unexpectedly pregnant, and what I discovered in that passage of even the first 9 months was that my experience of this change was so extraordinarily empowering. It was the first time where my body as a female body made sense to me. My job, my humanity expanded. I was kind of liberated from the shackles of the self and the ego and identity. So at the same time, I felt culturally already diminished, stereotyped. I lived in a time when abortion was readily available. I was the first one of all of my friends to ever get pregnant, and it just made no sense to people why I was having this child, without a husband at this time, at this moment in my life. I happened to be working on a story on I think Masonic temples, because I was doing another book on religion in America at the end of the millennium at the time. So I started to rethink the relationship of feminism to the rights of women and men, and I was surprised to see that there was no conversation really about mothers and the rights of mothers and what mothers did, and the work of mothers, the existence of mothers, even though that's a huge part of a woman's life. With the passage of time after I gave birth, I treated motherhood as a subject to understand and investigate, because I read so much on it, and there was very little theory on the topic. There was very little thought about what motherhood is, because most thought in patriarchy is written by our forefathers, and began to recomprehend the history of procreative relations. So while I was a young mother, my child was really a baby, I was so busy learning how to do this in a conscious way, not the way that I had been raised, but in the way that I wanted to raise a child in a new country with a new language, that it was very difficult to hold work and mother work. And so my writing work ended up, taking less and less of my time as I became less and less mobile. By the time my daughter was 2 or 3, I wanted to be stable so she could go to a school. So until then I took her with me. So that's how I rearranged my life to prioritize mothering, because I thought that was correct. But I found myself at a greater and greater disadvantage, financially, socially, and culturally, as a result. In fact, to my shock, I took up stitching, which I had done as a child on the island of Lesbos with my grandmas on the porch in the afternoons. And my artwork changed, from painting to this embroidery, because it became a meditative practice that allowed me to think. And there was a lot of rethinking to do. Art is a lot about time. Time is like the ultimate luxury in our world. It's what really, money can't buy. But we do give up our time in exchange for money. So it allowed me, stitching and making art allowed me this kind of exit from the system, the normative system of making money, of socialization, and gave me the time I needed to look at everything objectively, and understand motherhood as the first principle of life. And then from there, start rebuilding it up, rebuilding everything I knew in a different way, from the ground up. So I constructed slowly what I have come to call the procreativist theory of history and theory of human relations. And this took me into non-linear, mythic, right, or human time. So it got me out of the context of my life and my limited time and into something much greater. And again, it wasn't easy, because financially it was very risky. But it was the only way to fully understand what I was committed to doing. So as my child grew up and became older, I was able to test this more seriously, discuss it with many more people, with experts in the field, look for places where things had been enacted, minor programs. And even so, my view of it changed through the decades dramatically. And I wanted to make sure that I don't prematurely discuss it in ways that then would co-opt it or pigeonhole it before I felt clear that I understand all the implications of what this is, and how it could change the world for the better. So what I've come up with is this proposal, which I have written a book about now, for a universal mother income, which is mother salary paid on a monthly basis to mothers who sign up for it. An approximate amount of $2,400, $2,600 a month is what I have calculated, which also would allow the mothers to qualify for a mortgage because they have a commitment of income for 6 years, and qualify for a pension for those 6 years of work. So, Social Security, obviously, and health insurance, as well as free mandatory education, which can be in person and virtual, depending on where the mothers are. And access to counseling, to intra-mother networks, and advisory groups, and hopefully all of it overseen by something like a Department of Mothers. So I see it as a greater structure that's almost like a counterbalance to the Defense Department. So, the killing department and the life-giving department, right? And I don't know that, it would be nice in a future world if the budget for the mothers were equal to the budget for, right, the warriors. I think that this program would work nationally, would function nationally to improve the huge income inequality, to improve our birth rates, to improve the confidence of both women and men, mothers and fathers, to improve romantic relationships and marital relationships and intergenerational relationships, and to kind of liberate us from our extreme dependency on money and culture, to create a better balance between culture and nature through this education, but also through the change of where the money comes from, through the generations of difference that would be born from these UMI mothers. And I see it all being paid by different programs. One of the basic ones would be UMI supporting working people. So men and women who would sign up for a percentage of their wages that would go to UMI mothers, and they would be UMI card-carrying humans. So whether or not they want to have children of their own, whether or not people have inherited money and want to donate to mothers, there will be all kinds of different initiatives, which I go into in detail in my book, that would help bring funds into the Department of Mothers that are not necessarily only through government taxation. Ideally, not at all through government enforced taxation, if it can be helped. I have a proposal for cryptocurrencies to participate in this. And in the bigger picture, this would only make sense if it were universal, meaning global. It would mostly help women in the less developed world, and it would be kind of like a worldwide initiative to help, through mothers, humanity as a whole evolve to a stage where we can meet the challenges of whatever crisis we may be facing next. Through this education, through this improvement in a more fair financialization of our lives, and through a guarantee that mothers, no matter what, will be out there raising their children decently, with presence, with love, with care, even if the rest of us break everything in the process of technological development.